It's every little girl's dream, but for one lady, the fairy tale is soon to become a reality.
That she was more than a little bit nervous when she had to make it.
But I've always said, don't underestimate this girl. There's a lot to her.
She's already had to deal with being in the world's media's eye as simply Will's girlfriend.
Huge amount about her. We've had a very carefully constructed public image of her.
It's a revelation that has come as a surprise to British royal watchers and most likely to the royals themselves.
She didn't meet him at St Andrews. She met him before she got there, while she was at school in her sixth form.
Her Majesty invited Kate to her favourite residence, Balmoral Castle.
The Queen actually didn't meet Kate until sort of 8 or 9 years into her courtship with Prince William.
A royal family insider told Us Weekly that Queen Elizabeth and Middleton would often enjoy afternoon tea together.
The late Queen really put her arm around Catherine and showed her that there was a support network.
Kate had 20 years to really get to know the monarch. What a privilege as a future Queen consort.
She had faith in his relationship with Catherine. She knew that she would be a fantastic partner.
The late Queen reportedly made a special effort to ensure Kate felt welcomed into the royal fold.
And it was very obvious that she was showing her how one does this royal role.
She's a real breath of fresh air for the House of Windsor, so absolutely she's going to change it, but I think she's going to change it for the better.
If you can pass the Balmoral test, then you're in there. You're on the way to really being welcome.
And Catherine really took that to heart. She adored the late Queen.
It was clear from the outset that the Queen and Kate had many things in common.
She stood on the gravel drive at Balmoral, camera in hand, and nobody stopped her. That single detail, with a young woman photographing the Queen's private estate, it would have been unthinkable for almost anyone else invited through those gates. But this wasn't just anyone. This was 2009. Kate Middleton hadn't married Prince William yet. She wasn't Catherine, Princess of Wales. She was still, in the eyes of the press, just William's girlfriend of 6 years, a woman whose future in the family remained genuinely uncertain. If you want more deep dives like this, make sure to subscribe to Royal Archives. According to royal biographer Katie Nicholl in her book Kate, the Future Queen, something happened on that visit that royal watchers still point to today. The Queen gave Kate permission to take photographs at Balmoral, not a formal announcement, not a public gesture anyone outside the family circle would have noticed at the time. Just a quiet allowance, and according to Nicholl, an unusual one. Balmoral isn't just another royal residence, it's the one place widely described, including by the Queen's own granddaughter, Princess Eugenie, as where she felt most at home. 50,000 acres of Scottish Highland, where the family disappears from public view every summer. For decades, it also functioned as something else entirely, a test, an unofficial one. Nobody wrote the rules down. Everyone who married into that family learned them anyway. Kate had only met the Queen once before this trip, briefly, at the wedding of Peter and Autumn Phillips, Princess Anne's son and his then wife. A handshake, a few words, nothing more. So when Kate was invited to Balmoral itself, the inner sanctum, it meant the relationship with William had moved into a different category. And according to Nicholl, the Queen seemed to understand exactly what that visit would mean for a young woman walking into it alone. Until now, the Queen had met Kate only fleetingly, Nicholl wrote. But she went out of her way to make her feel welcome, giving her permission to take pictures at Balmoral. That's the sentence royal historians keep coming back to. Not because photography sounds dramatic on its own. It doesn't. But because of what it signals about a monarch who almost never let her guard down in front of outsiders. Nicholl put it plainly. As a woman who spent her entire life in public view, the Queen rarely allowed people to see past the formality. Family, closest friends, that was the list. Everyone else got the version of Elizabeth II the world already knew. Composed, careful, unreadable. Handing a camera-friendly welcome to a woman she'd met once, briefly, at someone else's wedding. That wasn't standard procedure. That was a choice. To understand why that choice mattered, you have to go back further than 2009, decades further. Historian Michael Patterson, writing about the private life of Elizabeth II, described what royal insiders had long called the Balmoral test, any future spouse brought to the estate would face it, whether they knew it or not. Enjoy the hills, the rain, the long walks, or don't. There wasn't much room in between. The Queen Mother passed effortlessly, back when she was simply Elizabeth Bowes Lyon dating the future King George VI. Wallis Simpson did not. Family accounts describe her first reaction to the estate's tartan carpets, reportedly declaring they'd have to go, as the kind of remark that sealed her fate in the family's eyes long before the abdication crisis made it official. Diana went through the same test in September 1980. By most accounts, she passed with ease. She came from similar aristocratic stock, understood the rhythms of a shooting weekend, knew how to charm a room of people quietly judging her. Prince Philip, in particular, was said to have taken to her immediately. But passing the test and enjoying what came after were two different things. In her own words, later recorded in Diana, in her own words, she admitted Balmoral became something closer to dread. "I panic a lot when I go up to Balmoral," she said. "It's my worst time." The estate that welcomed her so warmly at 19 became, over the following decade, a place she associated with performance and exhaustion rather than ease. That contrast is worth sitting with, because it reframes what happened with Kate almost 30 years later. The Queen wasn't simply running newcomers through a checklist of hills and rain and dinner etiquette. She was reading them, and by Nicholl's account, what she read in Kate prompted something different. Not a test to endure, but a gesture to receive. Some royal commentators have pointed to a much later, far murkier episode as a kind of counterexample. It was rumored for years that Meghan Markle first met the Queen at Balmoral in 2017, during the early stages of her relationship with Prince Harry, though Meghan herself later stated publicly that their first meeting actually took place at Windsor. Whether the rumor was ever true or not, it circulated widely enough that royal watchers began treating it as a natural comparison point. Two American-adjacent, camera-comfortable women, both entering the family through the same estate, decades apart with very different stories attached to their arrival. Why did Kate's visit go the way it did? Some royal commentators have suggested it was practical. The Queen understood exactly what these Balmoral visits meant for the women who came through them, and she'd watched enough newcomers arrive stiff with nerves to know a small gesture could change the entire tone of a weekend. Others have framed it as something closer to instinct. The Queen had, by every account, an unusually sharp read on people within minutes of meeting them. Maybe she saw someone who needed the ice broken. Maybe she simply liked her. What's not in dispute is the outcome. Kate kept going back. Year after year, for well over a decade, she remained one of the family's most consistent Balmoral guests, long after the wedding, long after the titles changed, long after most royal watchers stopped counting her visits because they'd simply become routine. The woman who arrived nervous with a camera in 2009 became, by every measure available, one of the late Queen's most trusted family members by the time of her death in 2022, at Balmoral itself, the estate where their relationship had first been quietly built. That's the part worth sitting with. Because so much royal reporting treats the early years, the noué, the girlfriend years, before the ring, before the wedding, as a kind of holding pattern. Not yet significant, not yet real. But Nicholl's account suggests the opposite was happening behind the scenes. The relationship between Kate and the Queen wasn't manufactured later, once the marriage made it official. It was already being built, deliberately, years earlier. One invitation, one small allowance, one quiet gesture at a time. And whether it's fair or not, that's exactly the kind of detail that gets lost in the version of royal history most people remember. The wedding gets the spectacle. The Balmoral visits get almost nothing. No cameras waiting outside the gates, no headlines the next morning. Just a family, largely left alone, deciding in private who belonged and who didn't. There's also a quieter irony sitting underneath all of this. Balmoral, for generations, was where the family scrutinized outsiders. where partners were watched, tested, occasionally found wanting, the way Wallis Simpson was, the way even Diana eventually came to dread. But for Kate, the same estate became, by Nicholl's telling, the place where she was handed something closer to an olive branch, a camera, permission. A small, specific kind of trust that Diana, for all her early charm, was never described as receiving in quite the same way. It raises a question that royal biographers have circled for years without ever fully answering. What exactly did the Queen see in that first meeting that made her decide Kate was worth putting at ease, rather than putting to the test? We don't have her private reasoning. What we have is the outcome, a relationship that deepened steadily for over a decade, built not on grand public displays, but on small, repeated moments of access most people never heard about until books like Nicholl's pulled them into the light. And in hindsight, that first Balmoral trip reads less like a footnote and more like a hinge point. The moment the direction of the entire relationship quietly tipped. Years later, Kate would become known as one of the most photographically active royals in modern history. Not because she hired the best photographers, but because she often was one. Every birthday portrait, every candid family shot released to the public traces back to a woman who was given room to bring a camera somewhere almost nobody was allowed to bring one. And the receipts, so to speak, are public. Look through the images the palace has released over the past decade, and Kate's name keeps appearing behind the camera, not in front of it. She photographed Prince George laughing in the garden at Kensington Palace for his 6th birthday. She took the black and white photo of Prince Philip holding a young George, 6 years before Philip's death, a photograph the family chose to share again the day he died. She captured William in the Hindu Kush during their October 2019 tour of Pakistan, a mountain range, a working trip, and somehow still Kate behind the lens instead of a staff photographer. Charlotte's 5th birthday portrait during the 2020 lockdown, Louis showing off rainbow-painted hands for his 2nd birthday, a tender black and white moment between King Charles and a young Louis, all Kate's work, all released through official channels, all treated by the family as ordinary rather than remarkable. By 2025, that habit had extended even to her own children. Kensington Palace shared a set of hand-drawn family portraits on Instagram. Not photographs this time, but drawings made by Kate alongside George, Charlotte, and Louis, tied to an early years framework about connection and creativity. The palace didn't frame it as a photography story, but it didn't need to. The pattern was already 15 years old by then. A woman handed a camera at Balmoral in 2009, still finding new ways to hold one in 2025. That's not a coincidence of hobby and access lining up conveniently. It's a thread. One that starts on a gravel drive in Scotland, with a monarch who rarely explained herself, deciding that this particular newcomer could be trusted with something most people never got near. That thread stretched for 15 years without much scrutiny, until March of 2024, when it briefly became the story itself. Kensington Palace released a Mother's Day photograph of Kate with her 3 children, her first official image since abdominal surgery that January. It was credited not to Kate this time, but to William, and it was meant to quiet growing speculation about her health. Instead, within hours, the world's major photo agencies, the Associated Press, Reuters, Getty, issued formal kill notices, pulling the image entirely. Photo editors pointed to a misaligned edge on Princess Charlotte's sleeve and inconsistency around her hand. The AP said plainly that the source had manipulated the image in a way that didn't meet its editorial standards. Kate responded herself in a statement signed simply, "C." She acknowledged experimenting with editing the way many amateur photographers do and apologized for the confusion. It was a strange moment for a channel like this one to sit with. The same photographic instinct the Queen had trusted enough to encourage at Balmoral in 2009 was, 15 years later, the exact thing generating headlines and doubt rather than warmth. The tools hadn't changed. The context around them had. Royal commentators were split on what it meant. Some framed it as an understandable misstep from someone genuinely more comfortable behind the camera than in front of a press office, a hobbyist who'd simply never needed to think about wire service standards before. Others treated it as evidence that the family's instinct for controlling its own image, cultivated for generations, going back to the same Balmoral discretion this story started with, had for once worked against them. Neither theory required bad intent. Both acknowledged the same underlying truth. Kate's relationship with photography was never just a hobby. It was access, it was control, and by 2024 it was also, briefly, a liability. The Queen didn't announce that trust. She never explained it publicly, and neither did Kate. It simply showed up, years later, in the photographs themselves, in a level of access and comfort that took most royal newcomers a generation to earn, if they ever earned it at all. The Balmoral test itself didn't disappear when Elizabeth II died at the estate in 2022. Royal commentators note the senior family still keeps a watchful eye on newcomers under King Charles, even if the ritual has softened from what Diana or even Kate once faced. But the specific gesture the Queen made toward Kate, the camera, the permission, the quiet exception to a lifetime of guardedness, never really needed repeating. It did its work once, at the very beginning, and the rest of the relationship simply built on top of it. That's the version of this story that rarely makes the headlines. Not a single dramatic scene, not a confrontation, not a turning point anyone could point to on a calendar. Just a quiet, early decision by a monarch who almost never made them lightly, and a relationship that, from that gravel drive onward, never really needed to be tested again.